I'm Shain, a New York Jewish mom who had the audacity in 1993 to continue a geriatric pregnancy and give birth at the age of 46.
And I'm Sarah, the result of that pregnancy. 32 years later, I'm currently a practicing therapist. Though Shain is often thought to be my grandmother, she's still my mom, and this is Listen to My Mother,
a podcast where we answer your real-life questions with 2 points of view, one rooted in motherly instinct,
and one rooted in clinical training.
You'll get guidance, support, maybe a little tough love, but always from the heart.
And if you'd like us to answer your question on air, head to the link in our show notes and send it our way. We want to hear any questions you have.
And now it's time to
Listen to My Mother. Hello.
Hi, darling. It's so good to see you awake. I know you had a rough weekend, but a very positive weekend. So I was so happy to hear about what you did. And I'd love for you to give me a little more information about it.
Yeah, so we were supposed to record an hour ago, but then you texted me like, what's going on? And I said, I'm still sleeping. This past weekend, I was at a bridal expo, not for me, but for work. We had a booth. I have a therapy practice that I do with 2 colleagues that specializes in premarital counseling. So we had a booth at the bridal expo. It's called Flower Crown Counseling. If anyone in Colorado needs premarital counseling, you can just give us a Google or go to flowercrowncounseling.com. Little shameless plug. And yeah, so it was fun. Saturday was a crazy day of setup. We didn't have dock access at the, load-in access at the venue. So we had to park in a parking lot. This is at the convention center. We had to park in a parking lot that was kind of around the corner. So it was like a half-mile walk to get from our car to our booth. And we had this little wagon that we would load things up into, and we did a couple different trips. And on one of those trips, we carried an entire couch with an armchair on top of it. We carried a lot of furniture from the parking garage to our booth. And sorry for the disturbance of Reese barking. Saturday was insane. I'm sore from all of the lifting and carrying and pulling of carts and the whole thing we had to do. And then yesterday, Sunday, we finally had dock access for the last 3 things, and that took 20 seconds. And there were actually people working there who brought the stuff in for us. It was very easy, and if only we had that for the couch, Saturday would not have been so insane. This is our first time ever doing an expo like this. So Saturday we set up the booth and then went shopping because we're like, oh, this thing that we need, and this thing that we need, and this thing that we need. It ended up going very well yesterday once we were all set up in there. It was interesting. There was the social experiment of it, where some people were so excited to see counseling at this bridal expo because most of the booths were venues and photographers and florists and hair and makeup and dresses and things like that, and then we're therapy. And some people were oh wow, that's so clever, never would have thought of this. And then some people were really personally offended that therapy was there. And it was just kind of fun because they'll whisper to each other, but we're watching, we see it, and they don't think we do, and it was just very interesting.
Yeah, but I think you have not as yet made clear exactly what it is you're offering, which I think is phenomenal, because I've said this to you before, that premarital counseling happens usually in the setting of a religious, that I know before your dad and I got married, we were called in by the rabbi who was going to marry us to explain our roles as husband and wife, and it was complete, if I may say, bullshit. He spent 15 minutes saying, here's your husband, here's your wife, go be nice, have a nice house, and raise a family. As long as they're Jewish, we're happy. And I know this is done. I've spoken to other people who meet with their priest or their minister before they're married. And again, they're given absolutely hardly any information about what it is that you're entering into as 2 individuals coming together. And what you've explained to me that you're doing in your practice with your 2 colleagues, I think is phenomenal. And just take a few minutes or a minute and just give a little overview of what it is you're offering people.
Yeah, so we actually have a handout that kind of explains exactly what you're talking about, that a lot of people associate premarital counseling with religious upbringing or religious institutions. And So while we think that religion is a really important topic for couples to discuss and make sure that they're on the same page about what they want religion or faith or spirituality to look like in their relationship, we're not working through a religious lens. So a lot of religious premarital counseling is just talking about like how will your union uphold the faith and fit in with our church basically. And we don't talk about that. Like we want to talk about how okay, are you in agreement on what religion looks like? And it's more than just are you both Christian? Great. It's okay. So you're like you want to go to church every Sunday. It's important to you that the kids go to church every Sunday and you are happy to go to church every other week, maybe once a month, maybe just for bigger holidays. Like you don't really care if the kids go. Okay, so now you're both Christian but you have different approaches. So let's make sure you're on the same page and kind of like are in agreement or can find a way to agree to disagree and just kind of figure out what's the balance here that works best for your relationship so there's no surprises down the line or that you are prepared for surprises down the line. And it's not just religion that we approach this way. So like we would also talk about finances and we'll talk about expectations around parenting and we'll talk about sex and intimacy and we'll talk about responsibilities and logistics and those types of things. Like really get in depth on all of this.
Yeah, I think also one of the important pieces is how are you going to deal with conflict?
Yeah, so conflict resolution and communication are huge pieces of it. And like a big thing we talk about is like you're never not going to have a hard time at some point. Any marriage is going to have hard things that it has to face and get through. And how much easier to get through it when you have a foundation of tools for communication and conflict resolution. When you understand the way that you're approaching different things. I mean, I traditionally just do like normal couples therapy down the line when an issue has arisen and now they come to therapy. And in so many of these cases, it's okay, if you had come to me before you got married and we prepared for these types of things that come up, it would be so much smoother now. I'm not saying if you do premarital, you'll never need couples therapy down the line. It's just smoother when you have the expectations already discussed.
I love your saying there.
Oh, the slogan?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, don't just plan your wedding, plan your marriage.
I think it's perfect. And I'm glad you had, pretty successful experience at this expo, and you sent me pictures of your booth and I loved it. It was beautiful. It was really really beautiful. So that's enough of the ad, and we'll move on to a completely different experience that we got a submission from Erica. It's not very long. So she says, I can't stop comparing myself to people in my life who make more money than I do. I'm feeling frustrated because I took a big risk in my career about 10 years ago and it did not pan out the way I wanted it to. I was climbing a corporate ladder and making decent money, and then I decided to try the entrepreneurial path. Honestly, I was a bit naive about how hard it would be, and it didn't pan out the way I wanted it to financially. So I re entered the job force a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, my earning capacity dwindled because of the time I was out of the official workforce. Not to mention, it's a weird job market right now. When I hear what my friends are making in the corporate world now, it's 4 to 5 times what my salary is. And it eats me up inside and makes me feel sick. I love my friends and I'm happy for them, but I wish my circumstances were different. I don't know how to find acceptance with where I am. I don't know how to release this feeling of failure or the real fear that I'm behind and won't be able to make up for it down the road. What can I do? I've tried accepting my past as a learning experience. I see that I experienced a lot of growth in trying something for myself. It's when I see my experience in comparison to others that it still stings.
This is tough for both of us, I think, because this is a little out of our area of, shall I say, expertise. But we do want to get submissions on any topic, and when we were talking about kind of, okay, how do we approach this? This isn't really the type of thing we would normally feel very confident answering. And I said to you, like, just think about what you would say to a friend in this position. So, what I can do with this is kind of a lot of this reminds me of my own career trajectory, that it's not exactly the same, where like I started in a career path, left it, and then came back, like back at the beginning. So kind of looking at your own progress as the past you was further along than the current you, and that's a hard place to be. And I can't really relate to that, but I didn't start my current career as a therapist until my late 20s, which most people who are like getting into this, or at least most of my closest friends who are therapists who I met through my program or at other like networking things, but that we're all in the same like place in our career, they all started right out of college. So my closest friends who are also therapists are like 25, 27, 28, and I'm 32. And by the time they're my age, they're going to be way further along than I am right now. There's also like the way that I did my degree was because I had a non-clinical master's. I wasn't allowed to start counting my hours that I was doing an internship until I finished my internship, because that's what made me eligible for clinical hours. So the people who were in a clinical master's program, they could count their internship hours. So they will be licensed well before I will be. And there definitely is like moments of comparison where I'm just like, I'm failing at this. I'm really far behind. I'm not like doing this on the timeline that I should be, or looking at my friends who are 5 years younger than me. One of them is 7 years younger than me, and like by the time she's the age that I am now, she will already have been in her career for 9 years and will be licensed and will be like have so much more experience, and she will already have a reputation. She will have already built herself a reputation, and she'll be known. And at that, like, where I am now, I've only been in this career for 4 years. I'm still pre-licensed, finishing my hours, or I'm in Colorado, it's conditionally licensed, not pre-licensed. So there definitely is a lot of comparison of like where I am versus where I should be, quote unquote, based on where my friends are and my peers are and my colleagues and like the people who I have connected with that are my age who have been licensed for 5 years, and like that sort of, well, I'm not doing this right because I'm so far behind of where everyone else is. But part of like when I was figuring out how I wanted to respond to this, because there's no age in this submission, we don't know how old Erica is, but I would assume that if there was a career transition 10 years ago, she's at the very least in her 40s. And so I looked up like who are some like really famous people who didn't get successful until their 40s. Some people just don't figure out what they want to do or where they want to be or how they want to pursue it until that point. And Julia Child didn't write The Art of French Cooking until she was like 50, and then had her TV career after that. And Samuel L. Jackson and Alan Rickman didn't have their breakout roles until they were in their 40s, and they're megastars. The guy who like co-founded, I don't know his name, the guy who co-founded PeopleSoft was 47 when he co-founded PeopleSoft, and then became like a billionaire. And I have to remind myself of these types of stories of these people who I am fans of, who I look up to, and oh, the thing that made them so famous and so successful, like that didn't happen for them until they were in their 40s. And so me feeling like I'm floundering and lost in my 30s is like, I got at least 10 more years to be floundering and lost before I really have to worry about it. And just kind of remind myself that like whatever timeline you see other people on is not your timeline, and that's fine. Right? Trying to compare yourself to the trajectory other people are on literally only hurts you. And just reminding yourself that your story is a different story than theirs. It's a really normal experience, I think, to if you kind of leave the workforce and come back. And I think that this is pretty common for women, especially like women who have left their careers to raise children and then tried to come back in, and it's like they have to start over and kind of start at a lower point, or technology has changed and they have to relearn everything. I think that this it's a really common feeling to kind of not 100% get it or slip right back in seamlessly. And I think that a huge piece of it also is like the reverse culture shock. And I know like I've experienced this when I've lived abroad, where like everyone expects culture shock, right? You move to a country that is so different from your own, and you expect the culture shock. So it's like you are open to all the things that are going to be different. But what people always forget to think about is the reverse culture shock of when you come home and expect everything to be exactly how you left it. But you've now been gone for a long time and life moved on and things are going to be different. And I know in my own experience, like when I moved to Australia, this was my first time living abroad. I was prepared for how things were going to be different there, but then I came back and just expected like the Sarah sized hole to be there waiting for me to just slip back into, and it wasn't. Life moved on, friendships moved on, things moved on, and I struggled to find my way back into the life I'd left behind. And I think that there's something really similar when you like leave the workforce and then come back to the workforce after 10 years is you have in your mind the world you left behind. You like this is what I'm going back to. But especially in the business world, things are changing so rapidly. The culture in like the businesses, in the offices, in the community has will change so much in 10 years. Technology changes. I mean, we've heard over the past 10, 20 years about how like Google has changed the way that the employee like experience is. Like they have the sleep pods and they have the breakfast bars and all those like crazy things that we hear about. But it like that is definitely spreading into the corporate world that like these companies are having different experiences for different expectations for how employees engage with each other, and also just societally we have different expectations for how people talk to each other and all that. So the culture will just like inevitably have changed. So trying to return to something the way that you remember it from 10 years ago is going to feel like a misfit because it isn't going to be what you remember it as. And then one last point, and then you can go ahead, that I think that something, Erica, that you need to be reminding yourself also when you're comparing yourself and your salary to your friends' careers and salaries, and that they've stayed in it for so long and worked themselves up, and now you're kind of back at the beginning, is that you have learned skills through entrepreneurship, regardless of how it turned out. You got experiences from that that people who have only been employees will never have. So there is something that you have gotten that someone else does not have, even, and so they're going to have something that you don't have. And that's just part of having the experiences that you have, is there is that trade-off. And to maybe try to find the benefit in the skills that you've acquired, the lessons that you've learned, that you can look at your colleagues and be like, how do I angle this so that the things that I have are leveraged in a way that like helps me here because my colleague does not have this because they didn't have this experience and I am unique in the experience that I have.
I agree with a lot of what you had to offer to Erica. I'm not sure if my math is 100% right, but she said that she took a big risk about 10 years ago and that she re entered the job force a couple of years ago. So it sounds, if my math is right, that she tried this business for 8 years. She gave it a good run
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't work out, I guess she says, financially. So a lot of what she looks for in her job, which why not, is to be financially very sound and making a good living. But I want to applaud her for having done this in the first place. She took a risk. I want to commend Erica for being a risk taker. She took a risk 10 years ago to leave a job that she was probably doing very well at. It was brave. It gave it, from what it sounds like, a good try for 8 years, and it didn't work out. So she chose to go, it sounds like she chose to go back, and there were choices there. She could have gone back to what she had left before, or she could have moved on in a different direction, which may have felt scary after a venture that didn't work out. So, my sense is she's brave. She takes a risk. She moves into something new. It doesn't quite work out. And now she's probably frightened of taking any more risk. You know, you can circumstances affect how you're going to react again. You may not then feel you can push forward in a new direction. So one of the things I want to say, which piggybacks on what you said, is a lot of what she writes here Her first sentence, I can't stop comparing myself to people in my life who make more money than I do. And then she finishes her very last sentence. It's when I see my experience in comparison to others that it still stings. But that's not really her experience is different than others. She did venture out. She did try something new. And she says, I experienced a lot of growth in trying something for myself. I would be very curious to know how she defines growth.
Hmm.
What did she get from that experience? What skills did she learn? What approaches to networking? What approaches to dealing with others? You're in a corporate world, it's very confined, I would think, sort of. I don't know. I've never been in the corporate world. But this idea of not defining for herself, what did she learn? 8 years, at
Hmm.
least 8 years, she was in this venture. Who did she meet? How can she use the skills she developed in these 8 years? What did she learn that can help her move maybe in a completely different path or in the path she's in now? How can she use that to move herself into something? Is she using the things she learned in her job? Now, I would tend to say this is something I wrote down as I was reading her thing. Okay. One of the things is every time you compare yourself to somebody else or to a group, every time you compare yourself coming from where you're coming from, where you're feeling like a failure, every time you're going to lose. There's always someone that has more than you do, that is better at something than you are. Somebody else gets the breaks, you don't get the break. Every time you compare yourself from a position of weakness, you're going to lose. So, this is, I'm saying, stop looking
Hmm.
at the others. And this I wrote, peripheral vision is great when you're driving or navigating through a crowd or walking down a dark street at night, but continually looking side to side, at who has more takes the focus away from your own path. It's expending your energy that you need to move forward by continuously looking at the others around you, what they have that you don't have. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your energy. You need to think about what your strengths are and how you're going to use them to move forward. It may take a little longer to get to the financial level you want to get to, but it's about your journey. It's not about the people around you who have gone through whatever they've gone through, and you really have no idea what struggles they've dealt with in order to be where they are. You only know about your own. Focus on how you can use your strengths. It seems like you've poo pooed them. I know I learned, but I don't know what to do with that. Define what you've learned. Define how do you use it? How do you use it to go forward? I wrote here, you tried and feel like you failed. So, but what are you bringing into your life at this point to take you on your journey? And stop comparing to other people. It's just a waste of time. And the way you sound, you'll always lose in the comparison. It's not fair to yourself. You're not doing yourself any favors whatsoever by looking around and not looking forward. Or look back, see what you gained, and use it in order to go forward. That's pretty much what I've got to say to Erica. What do you have to offer? What do you have now to offer? Offer it, use it.
One of the things that I'm thinking about is I talk about this with the couples that I work with a lot in terms of when relationships end, but it's I think the same in this situation. People always talk about how their relationship failed. And I want to remind them just because something ends doesn't mean that it failed. And the analogy that I'll use is kind of okay, someone dreamed their whole life of running a restaurant. They run a restaurant for 10 years. They enjoy it, all of it. At the end, they're just kind of like, this was, what it was, and it was everything I wanted it to be, and now I'm done. And the newspaper might say, restaurant closes after 10 years, and the implication might be that the restaurant has failed. But it didn't. If it served the purpose you wanted it to serve, it was not a failure. And the same is true for relationships, even when they come to an end. If it, you got a lot from the length of that relationship. And I think that the same is probably true for this venture that Erica took, that even though it ended, even though it wasn't as successful financially as she would have hoped for, doesn't mean it was not a success. And that I want to encourage her to look back on it as this was a successful venture. You had a vision, you saw it through, and you did it until it no longer served you, and then you moved on to something else. And that doesn't mean it was a failure. It just means that it ran its course. And to remind yourself of that like, I succeeded at building something all by myself. That is a success. Even if at the end of the day you didn't make the money you wanted to make, like, so many people don't have the bravery to step away and to go into something unknown, don't have the vision to make something that's from the unknown. You had all of these things and you did it and you succeeded at that. So remind yourself of that this was a success, and now you're on to your next venture. And that's going to be, the experience is going to be in a very different way. But I also want to address, because the opening line of the submission was that she compares herself to the people who make more money than her. And so I think money is a key piece here. And I'm wondering, does the lower income than your friends or the people in your life hold you back from engaging with them in the way that you want to? Are they going on vacations that you can't afford? Are they going to dinners that you can't afford? Are they going to dinner more often than you can afford? Does it hold you back? Because that's not clear from the submission. And I'm wondering, like, if it doesn't, if it's simply just a comparison of numbers, how does that serve you? If your lifestyle is the same and your, like, relationships with these people is the same as it would be if you were making the same amount as them, then the comparison serves you 0%. If it actually is coming down to it is holding you back and you are not able to engage with them the way that you want to, that's something else entirely. And that's a completely different conversation of that, it could be money, it could be anything that is now creating this wedge in your relationships. And now this comes into the area that I would say is our area of expertise, is the relational piece of it, of how do you bridge that gap of the wedge, whether it's money or anything else, that is making the friendship feel strained. But again, we don't actually have that information in the submission. This is just hypothesis.
One of the other thoughts I had was, you're looking at colleagues who stayed in the corporate world or stayed in their positions while you took a side venture. Can we ask how this is relating to lifestyle? To be in the corporate world and make a lot of money, does that mean you have to work 60 hours a week? Does that mean you don't have a personal life? You give your life? I don't know what your friends or your colleagues experienced over these 10 years. Do they have families? Do they have time to hang with their family? I don't know what their lives are like. But for yourself, what is it that you want for yourself in your lifestyle? Does that mean, again, does that mean you need a lot of money? Is money going to make you feel like you've been successful? Or is there something else in your life, something relationship wise, or, and that way that would give you sense of a life well lived and success in your life that doesn't necessarily mean a lot of money. I'm not saying money's bad, babe. I mean, money is important. You get to live better with money than you do without it. But it doesn't have to be the end all and be all of what your goals are. Money's helpful, but for it to be a goal in and of itself, that's a very narrow, very small life.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add. I think this was a tough one for us in a lot of ways, right? Wasn't a lot of information, but also this is I think a hard thing for either of us to relate to because we've never worked in the corporate world. And I think that there definitely is an expectation in the corporate world of status based on everything I know from watching Suits. Um, but like again, also like I do have a lot of friends who are in the corporate world and like title and like responsibilities and being respected, like it is a big piece of this culture that I don't think either of us can really relate to or identify like with that piece of it. Like the piece that really resonates for me is feeling like you're behind in your career, because I very much know what that feels like and I can speak to that. And really all I can say on that is just having to constantly remind myself that I had a whole life before I started this career. I got to live abroad in 3 different countries. I did all of these things, which is why I started my career later than my friends who went right out of college. And I have these experiences that are unique, that provide perspective, that they have their own life experiences that they've been through that are unique and provide perspective. And those things cannot be compared. And I think that the same is true here. It's like Erica has been through these things that her colleagues have not been through, and they've been through things that she has not been through. And to compare them is just a chasm of a waste of time. They can't be compared. The experience that you've had is yours, and the way that you use it is up to you.
I look at, you've talked about your own life. I've had a longer life than you have, but I've spoken about this recently. I was at a talk by a woman who wrote a book. I'll give her book a plug, even though you can't get it anywhere. It's called Crone Age, in which she interviewed 5 or 6 women in their 80s about their life, what their life was like, what they experienced, what their hopes and dreams were. Did they fulfill their hopes and dreams? What was life like when you're now past all the things you had to do for someone else? You're now in your 80s. What do you see your future as? Because people in their 80s really do see a future.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm closing in on that very much so. So I think back after listening to this talk about my own path. When I was graduating from college, we had zero opportunities. You could be a teacher, a secretary, or a nurse. That was it. That was all you were allowed to, and go pick one. So I picked teacher, and I was a teacher for a while. In terms of my career, I then worked in, besides kids came and you dealt with them, you fed them, you bathed them, you made sure they did their homework, you raised them, you gave them a sense of morals, you did whatever you did with your kids. At the same time, you're living a life. And I worked in your dad's, my husband's business for 12 years. I learned a lot of skills in that business. And then I went on to being, you know, walked into, strangely enough, because I had a career, not a career, but experience before as a dancer and a yoga practitioner. And I end up now, I own a yoga studio
Mm-hmm.
where I'm teaching, and it's a business and I'm running it. The trajectory just went off in many, many different directions. And Erica, you have no idea where you're going to end up. Just keep moving one step in front of the other. Keep your eyes open. Your life may take a very different path if you use what I learned working in my husband's business for 12 years was I learned how to run a business. And that's what I'm doing now, and I'm doing it very successfully.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very good about what I'm doing and the skills, and I use those skills in many ways. So keep moving forward. Take what you've learned, make it work for you. That's it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great place to finish up with an exclamation point on the end of that sentence and wrap up.
Okay, sweetheart. I'm super proud of you and where you are now and your trajectory and how much you bring to what you're doing and where you're going. I'll add one more little thing. You can either choose to cut it out or not. When I was raising my 3 kids, your brother, your sister, and you, the one thing I think I've taught or stress to all of you is it's not about how much money you make. Make what you need to feed your family, to have a roof over your head, to have some leisure time, but it's not about amassing wealth. It's about whatever you choose to do in order to make your income. It's something you love to do. Love what you're doing, but it has to give you enough income so you can live. It doesn't have to be rich, but live well. And what I say to people once I've told them this was my one of my philosophies in raising children is all three of you believed me. All three of you are really doing what you love. It may not be the most lucrative, but you're doing very well. And I'm pleased for all of you.
I appreciate that, and we did all believe you. We did go off on the ventures, the things that we really wanted to do, and I want to acknowledge that we had the ability to do that because there was money in the family, right? Like we had a safety net if we really fell flat on our face, which is not the majority of people's experiences. That there are a lot of people that I have as clients, a lot of people that I know personally who have never had the freedom to do what they like love to do because they need to do what's offered to them because they don't have that safety net. And so I just want to acknowledge that being able to do what you love is a privilege, and it's not that easy for most people.
Actually, you taught me something really important as my child, as being your mom. When you were in college, you went to a state school, but it wasn't our state.
Mm-hmm.
So we paid full nut because you were an
Mm-hmm.
out of state student.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of your friends were in state and had limited resources. And you would tell me that sometimes they had to take a semester off because they needed to make money in order to come back and pay for books and do that kind of thing. And you told me at one point that you wanted to get a job. And my reaction to you was, your job is
Mm-hmm.
to get good grades. It's not to have a job outside of school. Focus on school, do well in school. And you came back to me with something that actually shamed me or made me feel not so happy with my point of view, which was my friends are in school, doing well, and have jobs. Are you telling me that I'm not as good as them? That I can't be a good student and also have a job? It was eye opening for me, really. And it was like, oh my God, oh, of course you're not less. Go get a job. And you did.
I
Don't
did.
think
I got a job I
nuts.
hated, but I don't remember saying that. Especially
Yes.
like really the part that I don't remember is the fact that I was like I thought that I could be a good student because I was not a good student.
But you had to promise me that you were,
I know.
But you did well. You did well. I got your transcript at the end of every semester. But what I thought was really, really important was you took a job with Dunkin' Donuts where you had to wake up God knows what time. You hated the job
Mm-hmm.
and you stuck with it. And you
Yeah.
stuck with it. And you impressed the hell out of me. You really did.
I did end up quitting after my manager got creepy and inappropriate, but again, I had the privilege to quit because I was like I can quit and still be okay financially, which I know a lot of there was a lot of stuff going on in that job. Like one person ended up getting fired because she was stealing money from the register. She was a single mom and that was the only way she could make the money she needed to pay for her kid because she had no skills and Duncan was the job she could get. And like just kind of going back to my point of people take what is offered to them when they don't have the privilege or safety net to go for the thing that they want.
But then I'm very proud of my children to understand that yes, you are privileged and you do know that other people have struggles. You don't write them off as, well, they could do it if they no, circumstances make a very, very big difference. So once again to Erica, use your skills.
Right, because
Use them.
running a business, starting something from scratch is a skill. So there is definitely something really valuable. As you said, you grew, but really like lean into the value of what you got from that time as an entrepreneur. That is invaluable experience.
And on that, we'll entrepreneur ourselves right out of here.
Okay. Well, I have to go to my entrepreneur, my job, my entrepreneurial private practice job that I own and run and I'm the only employee at.
Well, that's the thing. If it's a single person job, if you don't do it, you're not getting paid. That's it.
So I got to go get ready for work. But it has been lovely chatting with you, Mother, and I will talk to you soon.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye. I'm Sarah.
I'm Shain.
And this has been Listen to My Mother.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a positive review and subscribing to us on your favorite platform.
And if you'd like the chance to listen to my mother, head to the link in our show notes, which is currently bit.ly/listen to my submission. That's bit.ly/listen to my submission and submit your question.
No question is off limits.
And don't forget to follow our journey on Instagram at Listen to My Mother or at whatsthepoint.therapy.
Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.
Bye, Mama.
Bye, baby.